Yeah. So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
The first line is, enjoyment in life is pursued with ease as it seems pleasurable at the moment.
What's interesting there is how it points out just that human tendency to kind of go towards what feels good, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's like we're wired for it.
Yeah, it's like instant gratification.
Yeah.
But, I'm struck by that word ease.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that we, enjoy those pleasurable things, but that we pursue them so effortlessly.
So easily.
Without even like a second thought.
And Shankaracharya is hinting that this ease, this like lack of conscious choice is part of the problem. We're just kind of on autopilot, driven by our senses, without really stopping to think, like, where are we going with this?
Yeah, are we just being led around by our senses?
Exactly. And, he says that this comes from a fundamental ignorance.
Ignorance of what?
Well, it's an ignorance of our true nature, of who we are beyond this physical body and, this stream of desires that we're constantly experiencing.
So we get so caught up in these, like, temporary pleasurable experiences that we lose sight of.
Yeah, the bigger picture.
Something bigger, something more lasting.
Exactly. We're so focused on the temporary that we miss the eternal.
So it's like we're mistaking the map for the territory.
It's a great way to put it.
We're caught up in this illusion, this Maya. Instead, seeing the true landscape of existence.
And, the verse goes on to talk about the consequences of living in that illusion.
Okay.
But later, pain and illness arise in the body, showing the consequences of such indulgence.
Ouch. Yeah, that one hits home.
It does, doesn't it?
Like what goes up must come down,
Right, but applied to our pursuit of pleasure.
Yeah, exactly.
What Shankaracharya is emphasizing here is the impermanence of the body.
Right.
And the inevitability of suffering or dukkha when we're so attached to this sensory world.
Oh, so it's like...
He's reminding us that aging, sickness, and eventually death are all just natural consequences of constantly chasing after these fleeting gratifications.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's like we're racking up this karmic credit card bill,
Okay.
But instead of paying with money, we're paying with physical and emotional pain.
That's a good way to put it.
And oftentimes we try to ignore that pain or numb ourselves to it, whether it's through distractions or substances or, even just denial. But what Shankaracharya is saying is that we can't outrun those consequences forever.
Right.
They catch up to us.
They always do.
Whether it's in this life or the next.
Okay, so we've got this constant pursuit of pleasure and these inevitable consequences.
Right.
And then the verse takes kind of an interesting turn.
Okay.
It says, even though in the world death is the inevitable end, and one seeks refuge in it. Death as a refuge.
That seems kind of counterintuitive.
It does, right?
Like we're usually afraid of death. Yeah. We see it as this thing to avoid at all costs. Yeah. But Shankaracharya is saying that actually in the context of reincarnation, death is just a transition.
No, it's not the end.
It's not the end, it's just a change.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so the refuge that he's talking about isn't about escaping existence. It's about escaping this fear and this clinging that comes with being so attached to this particular life.
To this body.
To this body, yeah.
Okay, I see.
When we can really grasp that death is just, a shedding of this physical shell. Right. It's a stepping through a doorway into another realm. It can actually free us from that fear.
And from that clinging.
And that shift in perspective can allow us to start living more fully, more presently in this life.
Makes sense. But then the verse throws in another curveball.
Okay.
It says, yet the sinful actions committed throughout life are not abandoned even in the face of death.
Wait a minute.
So even though death is a transition, it doesn't mean we get a clean slate.
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
Shankaracharya is saying that while the body dies, the karma, the actions and their consequences, those stick with the soul.
Oh, so we're carrying our baggage with us.
Yeah, exactly. We can't just leave it behind.
From one life to the next.
Exactly. And understanding this is key because it shifts our focus away from seeking this temporary refuge in death and toward addressing the root cause of that baggage in the first place.
The root cause of the baggage.
Yeah, so it begs the question, what are these sinful actions that bind us to the cycle of reincarnation?
Okay.
What are the patterns of thought and behavior that keep us stuck in that loop of, seeking and suffering?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Right.
And I think we've unpacked a lot here just in these first few lines.
Yeah.
This allure of pleasure.
Yeah.
Or
consequences.
The consequences, the paradoxical nature of death as a refuge.
Right.
And the fact that our actions persist
Yeah, they stick with us.
beyond the physical body.
It's like Shankaracharya is giving us a sneak peek into the human condition, the challenges that we face,
Yeah.
and hinting at a path towards something more.
But there's so much more to explore here.
There's so much more.
So much more to unpack.
We've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
I think so too. You know, it's amazing how Shankaracharya can convey these, profound truths about the human experience in such simple language.
Yeah, it really is.
We could spend hours unpacking each word of this verse.
Oh, absolutely. And it really gets you thinking, like, how often do we just kind of go through life pursuing enjoyment without really even examining our motivations? It's like we're on this pleasure-seeking autopilot.
Exactly, and that's where the concept of karma comes in. Those sinful actions that Shankaracharya mentioned.
Right.
They're not about some rigid moral code or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's more nuanced than that. They're actions that are driven by ignorance of our true self.
Okay.
That place of pure awareness beyond the ego and its desires.
So it's not necessarily about the action itself, but like the intention behind it.
Exactly.
If we're acting out of, fear or attachment or this mistaken belief that happiness comes from external things,
Right.
that's what creates negative karma.
Precisely. Think of it this way. Every action creates a ripple effect. It shapes not just our present reality, but it also influences the course of our future lives.
Okay.
It's like planting seeds. If we sow seeds of ignorance and attachment, we're going to reap a harvest of suffering.
Yeah.
But if we can cultivate awareness and act from a place of understanding,
Okay.
then we can create a more positive, liberating trajectory for ourselves.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
It reminds me of what we were saying before about, the ease with which we pursue enjoyment. It's like we're not even really fully present in those moments.
Right.
We're just reacting to our impulses instead of choosing consciously.
And that lack of presence, that's the real trap. Because when we're not fully aware of our motivations, it's so easy to just fall into these repetitive patterns of behavior that create more suffering.
And not just for ourselves, but for others too.
Exactly. It has a ripple effect.
So how do we break free from those patterns?
That's the big question.
The verse kind of hints at this idea of death as a refuge.
Right.
A way to escape the clinging and the fear that keep us bound to this cycle of suffering. But if death doesn't erase our karma, if those actions persist, how can it really be a refuge?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Right.
Remember, Shankaracharya is speaking from the perspective of the soul's journey, this continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
Okay.
The refuge that he's talking about isn't about annihilation or escaping existence altogether.
Yeah.
It's about finding liberation from the fear of death itself, that deep-seated terror that keeps us clinging to, the fleeting pleasures and attachments of this world.
Because when we're no longer terrified of death,
Right.
we can start to see it for what it truly is.
Exactly.
Just a transition.
Just a shedding of the physical body.
Right.
A stepping stone on the soul's journey.
And that shift in perspective can be incredibly liberating.
It can.
It allows us to detach from those things that we're so desperately clinging to, possession, status, relationship,
All those external things.
and start living more fully in the present moment.
Exactly being here now.
It's like we're loosening the grip on those sinful actions, those patterns of behavior that keep us bound to that cycle.
Yeah. We're not erasing them,
Not erasing them,
but
but
we're understanding their root cause
okay.
and choosing to act differently.
And that understanding,
Yes.
that shift in consciousness, is the key to breaking free
it is.
from this cycle of reincarnation.
To attaining moksha,
Right.
that ultimate liberation.
That Shankaracharya is pointing us towards.
Exactly.
So even though death doesn't wipe the slate clean,
Right.
it can serve as a catalyst for change.
It can.
It can be that moment of reckoning
Yeah, where we realize.
where we realize that true happiness and freedom come not from clinging to the impermanent things of this world,
The external thing.
but from aligning ourselves with our true nature,
Exactly.
with the eternal essence of who we are.
That's beautifully put.
I love that perspective.
Me too.
Okay, so we've explored this idea of death as a refuge, the persistence of karma, the importance of understanding our motivations and our actions.
It's a lot to take in.
It is a lot to process.
But it's important stuff.
It is, but I'm curious,
Okay.
what stands out to you the most in this part of the verse?
What really strikes me is this emphasis on conscious choice.
Oh, okay.
Shankaracharya isn't saying that we should completely renounce pleasure or live a life of austerity.
Right.
He's inviting us to become more aware of our desires, to examine the motivations behind our actions, and to choose a path that aligns with our deepest truth, with that understanding of our true self.
So it's like we're being called to step out of that pleasure-seeking autopilot.
Exactly.
And become the conscious creators of our own experience.
Yes, both in this life and beyond.
And that's a powerful invitation.
It is. It really is.
One that can lead to a life of, greater freedom, purpose, and joy.
A more fulfilling life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Delving into some pretty profound ideas about pleasure, pain, death, and the journey of the soul.
It's a lot.
It is. But there's still one more line to explore in this verse.
Okay.
And I have a feeling it's going to tie everything together beautifully.
I think so too.
It's amazing how just one verse from the Bhaja Govindam can spark such a deep conversation.
It really is.
Like, it's so thought-provoking. It's like Shankaracharya knew exactly what we'd be thinking about all these centuries later.
It really speaks to the timelessness of these teachings, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, these are challenges that people have been grappling with for centuries.
Navigating pleasure and pain, understanding death.
Right.
Trying to figure out, what true fulfillment is.
Yeah, and how to get there.
These are universal themes.
They really are.
They resonate across cultures and, throughout history.
Absolutely.
And I think what makes this verse so compelling is that it doesn't just present the challenges.
Right.
It offers a way forward, a path towards liberation from, those cycles of suffering that we've been talking about.
And that path starts with self-awareness.
Okay.
With really understanding who we are beyond these limitations of the body and the ego.
Right.
Remember that concept of ignorance we were talking about?
Yeah.
That's the root cause of so much of our suffering.
That ignorance.
The mistaken belief that our happiness depends on, these external things, on chasing those fleeting pleasures.
Yeah, and it's so easy to fall into that trap, right?
It is, especially in today's world.
Today.
With all the distractions and the temptations that are constantly bombarding us.
It takes real effort to cultivate that awareness.
It does.
To actually pause and question those impulses that are driving us.
Right, to stop and
towards, instant gratification.
It's not easy, but it's worth it.
It is worth it.
Because it's the key to breaking free from those patterns of behavior that keep us bound to that cycle of suffering.
And that's where things like meditation and self-reflection.
Right.
And connecting with something larger than ourselves can be so transformative.
Absolutely. They help us to quiet the mind, to see through those illusions, and to reconnect with that deeper sense of peace and joy that's already there inside us.
It's like we're learning to disentangle ourselves from that web of desires and attachments.
Yeah, that keep us, trapped.
Yeah, ensnared in that cycle of reincarnation.
Exactly.
And as we disentangle ourselves, we start to experience a different kind of freedom.
Right.
It's not freedom from indulging in every passing whim.
No.
But it's freedom from aligning our actions with our highest values.
With our true nature.
With that understanding of our true self as pure awareness.
Beautifully said.
That makes me think about the last line of the verse, which we haven't really talked about yet.
Right.
It says, "Yet the sinful actions committed throughout life are not abandoned even in the face of death." I think that's a powerful reminder that true liberation isn't something that just happens to us when we die.
It's an ongoing process.
It is.
It's something we cultivate in this life, moment by moment.
Right.
Through our choices and actions.
It's not about seeking escape from death, but about transforming our relationship to life itself.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that every choice we make, every action we take, has consequences that ripple out.
And those consequences, that karmic imprint travels with us, shaping not just this life, but also the course of our future lives.
So the question becomes, how do we want to shape that future?
Right. What kind of legacy do we want to create?
What seeds of compassion, wisdom, and understanding
do we want to plan?
Powerful questions to consider.
They are.
Especially as we wrap up this deep dive into the Bhaja Govindam.
It's like Shankaracharya is leaving us with a challenge. To wake up from that slumber of ignorance, to embrace the transformative power of self-awareness, and to start living in a way that aligns with our deepest truth and purpose.
And that challenge is ultimately an invitation to a more fulfilling, meaningful, and liberated life.
A life where we're no longer slaves to our desires, but conscious creators of our own destiny.
Both in this world and beyond.
That's a beautiful way to sum it up.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
I hope it sparked some new insights for you.
Me too.
And maybe even inspired you to take a deeper look at your own life.
At your own choices.
Yeah, your own choices and the legacy that you're creating.
It's been a great conversation.
It has. And remember, the journey of self-discovery is an ongoing process.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.